All right, and welcome back to Photo Tips. We've got Nala with us today, and we've got a treat for you. I want to show you a fairly new plugin for Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Lightroom, as well as a standalone application. It's called Sharpen AI, made by Topaz Labs. And basically, it's using artificial intelligence to sharpen your somewhat blurry photos, or if it's a little bit out of focus or just not enough resolution that you'd like. This tool can help, and I saw some results from it and I was really excited, so I wanted to show it to you here as well. Not sponsored by them at all, just wanted to show you because it's helped me out a lot. So let me bring you into Adobe Photoshop right here, and I have an image, and this is taken on a 12 megapixel digital SLR. And you know, I already made the edits in Adobe Camera Raw, but we brought it into Photoshop so we can use the plugin. I'll zoom into 100% here, and you can see, it's reasonably sharp, but it's an older lens, an older camera, so there's a little bit, that's probably, we could probably fix there. So what I'm going to do, we want to make sure first that we are working in RGB color. We can't do this so much in black and white, although I think if you convert the black and white to color, it will still work. But for our purposes, we got a color image. So I'm going to go up to the top here in Adobe Photoshop. And what you do, once you install the plugin there, and there will be information below the video where you can download it and try. There's a 30-day free trial, but you do have to purchase it if you decide to use it more than that. So I'm going to go down to Topaz Labs and hit Topaz Sharpen AI. And what it's going to do, it's going to open up a plugin down here, so we'll click on that. And the first thing it's going to do, it's going to have three different modes. It's going to have Sharpen, Stabilize, and Focus. And Sharpen is just basically like an improved version of the sharpening in Photoshop or Adobe Lightroom. Probably a little bit better, although I imagine Adobe will be catching up soon. And the focus is if you're slightly out of focus, maybe use focus something a little bit more in the foreground, you wanted to focus more in the background, that solves that problem. And the stabilize is if you're a little bit shaky there, or perhaps your subject was moving, you didn't have a high enough shutter speed. So let's take a look at it here. By default, it seems to start with the sharpen option right here. And it has an automatic option, which is enabled in my software here. And basically it's decided these are the best settings. But of course you can go in here and adjust if you wanted to do that and really sharpen things up if you really wanted to. It just takes a second here to do this. And that even increases a little bit more. That's actually pretty decent. It's not too bad. One thing I will mention, this does use artificial intelligence. It is pretty processor demanding and graphics card demanding. This computer we're working on right now is a 2019 13-inch MacBook Pro. We have 16 gigabytes of memory and we have a quad-core processor. But we do not have a dedicated graphics card. It's using the one built in to the computer itself, not an ATI or an NVIDIA card. They do recommend, especially with larger images, remember this is only a 12 megapixel image, they do recommend that you have I think at least 4 gigabytes of video memory, ideally. But in fact, I'm finding this is working well on my system. But again, it does require quite a decently powerful computer for this to work effectively. So enough of that, let's go back to the image here. You can see sharpening, that did improve quite a bit, and you can actually do a split view here, and I'll show you, kind of giving you the before and after, although I think this is a separate part of the image, but you can see quite a bit of a difference there between those two things right there. So let's go ahead and do that. Let me show you some different things. All this isn't necessarily out of focus. I do want to show you the focus option, just to give you an idea there. So I'm going to click on focus, and it's going to take a little bit longer. The sharpen is the quickest way to do this. The focus option is probably a little bit slower, and then the stabilize option is even a little bit slower. So we're probably going to be skipping ahead here a little bit in the video, so you won't have to wait for this spinning ball here to complete. But let's go ahead and wait for this to finish. Okay, so that took a little bit of a minute or so, and to be honest, there's not that much of a difference between the previous version and this new focus version. So for this image, because the image isn't really out of focus, it's not making too much of a difference. But again, it's probably giving you the same strength that the Sharpen tool did, with a little bit of a higher manual adjustment. So I'm going to move to stabilize, and this is going to create probably the biggest effect. And this does take a little bit longer, so again, we're probably going to skip ahead here. It might take a minute or so on my computer to generate a preview, maybe a little bit longer to actually render the image at the end. So we're going to go ahead and stabilize. All right, and we're finished. It took about a minute or so on this computer to render that preview. And let me show you the before and after. Here's the before, and here is the after. It is super, super, super sharp. This really looks really nice. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go ahead and apply. And again, this is going to take a little bit longer. It takes a little while to generate the preview. It takes even a little bit longer to do the entire image, because obviously it's not just a section it's rendering. So I'm going to go ahead and hit apply, and it will bring us back into Adobe Photoshop with the edit done as soon as it's complete. So just bear with me another couple of minutes. Be right back. All right, and we're back. Now that took a couple of minutes, although in this computer we are doing a screen capture and running off the battery at the same time, so it's probably a little bit slower than it normally would be. But I want to point your attention here to the red flower parts of the tree here. You can really see how they're popping out, and it really looks quite nice. Let's go ahead and start. I'm going to go back to history, and I'm going to go ahead and show you when we open the file, which we'll just go back in history and hit open. And you can see it definitely is a little bit less sharp. And then when I go ahead and do the adjustment there, it really makes it pop, makes this look like a much more higher resolution lens, perhaps a higher resolution sensor. So and there's not too many consequences here with this image. So that's a really nice little upgrade there, I think, from that image. So I'm going to go ahead and close that out. Now, it worked well there, but I have found occasionally there are a few little problems. So I'm going to go ahead and open up another image here. And this is of this particular waterfall. I'm going to go ahead and zoom into 100%. This is an old film scan, about 3200 DPI as I recall. And it's, it's a decently sharp image, but what you notice here is there is a little bit of blur, and that is because I was standing on a metal platform that most likely was shaking ever so slightly just due to the force of the water around. There's probably some vibration there. So I'm going to do the same thing now. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do the stabilize tool right off the bat, because I know that's the problem. It was shaking ever so slightly. It was a long exposure, and that's what caused that little bit of shake there. So I'm going to go ahead and do my plugin again like we did last time, and we're going to go ahead and do that stabilize option. And again, it's doing the sharpen tool automatically, which again just takes a second. Sharpening does not take that much processing power, and maybe that even improved a little bit. But I'm going to go over to stabilize here, and that will just take a minute or so, obviously, for that to complete, and then we'll come back and look at the result. Okay, so here's the preview, and you can see a ton of detail was pulled out. It's almost like, it almost is like magic in a way. Now there is some additional noise, but again, this is a slide film. Having noise like that isn't necessarily out of the ordinary. But I want to direct your attention a little bit down here for a second. It's going to have to, when I move that little cursor, it's going to have to do a preview again, which will just take a little bit of a second here. In fact, I'll go ahead and just leave the video up so you can see. Again, we're on a 2019 Apple MacBook Pro, quad-core i5, 16 gigs of memory, and we're relying on the Intel integrated graphics. If you do have an ATI or NVIDIA graphics card inside your computer, it is going to run a lot faster. All right, so this is the problem I'm talking about. So, sometimes it is artificial intelligence. It's trying to figure out what's what and what needs to be sharpened. And for some reason, down here, it must be thinking this is some sort of a texture, but all this is the water, and it's over sharpened here. Now, what you can do if you would like is you can move the slide. You can see it was all the way up here. I can reduce the effect, and we'll say, bring it to about there. And of course, it's going to go through its thing here again. Okay, as you can see, it did reduce the effect of it just a little bit, although it's a little bit less sharp over here now. So I'm going to go back to the way it was, and then I'm going to show you how you would solve this problem. One weakness of the plugin is that it cannot edit specific individual areas. When you give it an image, it's going to do the adjustment over the entire image. So maybe that's an improvement they can make later on, but for now they don't have that. So I'm going to go ahead and back and say auto, because I liked what it did with other parts of the image. So I think we can make this work. So it's just going to take another minute or so for us to go back to that first result that you saw. And then we're going to hit apply, and then we'll obviously bring it back into Photoshop. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take a version of the old image that's not sharpened, stick it below it on a different layer, and then we're going to erase that top sharpened layer to reveal the unsharpened layer beneath, but we're only going to do it in certain parts here. So it's already finished that preview. I'm going to go ahead and hit apply, and unfortunately, like I said, it's going to take us a couple minutes for it to complete the task, and then it'll bring us back into Photoshop. Just bear with us here while we get that done. All right, and through the magic of television, we have finished. Let's go ahead and look at that 100%, and you can see the huge difference that was made, especially up in this area. Let's go ahead and see when we opened it. Huge difference, and hopefully you can see it on your screen here, because I know it's a little bit lower resolution, but it makes a really big difference there. But again, we have the problem down here with this kind of pixelization or over-sharpening, not sure what it is. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, I have another version of the image ready to go. And I will go ahead and load that up. And then I'm going to go ahead and make this background a layer, just so we don't have any problems. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this unsharpened image, I'll show you right here, and we're going to go ahead and drag it over. It's exactly the same dimension, so there's no adjustment there it needs to be done. And I'm going to go ahead and move it right there. Perfect. And then I'm going to go ahead and move that, showed up as layer 1, I'm going to move it below layer 0 right there. So we're going to put the sharpened version on top. In fact, I'll close up that old version just not to confuse us. And you can see right there, we still have the sharpened version up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my layer 0, because that's the sharpened layer, and then I'm going to grab over here my erase tool. Now, one little thing here, what I'm going to do is erase the top layer to reveal some of the bottom layer below, but only the parts that are the problem parts. Now, I did try using the healing brush, a little bit of cloning. It helps a little bit, but I still find this is the best way to do it, at least for this image right here, although you can certainly play around with it. So got a pretty big brush. We've got the opacity and flow at 100%. So it's the full effect. So I'm just going to go in here and we're going to start erasing. You can see right away it disappeared, but we got to be careful because there is a pretty big difference between the sharpened and the non-sharpened. So I'm going to come up here and we're judiciously come up here. I think I'm probably going to stop about right there. We have to find a place to end this. It's natural, because otherwise it's just going to be this very abrupt transition between the non-sharpened and the sharpened version. So I think about right here is a good place to stop it, and it's not going to be too noticeable. So you can see we eliminated that right here, made it work pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to, there's the original version, like that. In fact, I'll show you some of the stone there, and then we're going to go to the final version right there. So as you can see, this is a very powerful tool. It does require a pretty powerful computer. Even this fairly high-end 13-inch MacBook still could probably use a few upgrades, but it's working well for this, I think, overall, if you don't mind waiting a couple minutes. It is almost magical. There are downsides, and we've shown how we can correct those here. So definitely try out this Sharpen AI tool from Topaz Labs. I do think it's worth it. I'm not paying by them at this point of anything. If I am, I'll definitely note it down in the comments below if there's any affiliate links. But as we are filming, there is none at this point. So hey, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, and please subscribe to the channel so you can see other great videos just like this one. So on behalf of Nala and I, who is completely passed out here, do appreciate you watching Photo Tips, and you have a good one. Bye-bye.